Well, hey, welcome to the line. I'm here with Patrick Rohal and Rob White. Both of these guys are doctors, so I'm feeling a little. I feel like they're judging me for drinking bourbon it's just water. It's just water. But anyway, we're here today, and we're stepping up to the line to have a conversation and bring something to the forefront that is actually something that has changed the way that we do business in our company, and I think is changing something out there in the healthcare industry. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but first we're going to get to know these two guys and have some conversation with them. But we're going to be talking today about direct primary care and what that is. So, Rob, I'm going to let Patrick go first because you've already warmed up a little bit, and we'll just throw you to the wolves here. But
appreciate that,
Patrick. Tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got to this chair. Well, and what is your business? What do you do?
So I am the founder of a direct primary care practice, Covenant MD in Lancaster, PA. We also have an office in York, PA. Started working on Covenant in 2015. Opened our doors January 2016. And I first heard about the direct primary care movement probably around 2007. So I was probably a third-year resident in the U.S. Air Force. So I did the health profession scholarship, Air Force paid for medical school, did my residency in the Air Force, and did 4 years of active duty payback. Great program for any of those budding medical students out there. Give the Air Force or the military a serious consideration there. But being a senior resident at that time, I was beginning to see my career stretch before me. And even as a sort of coddled resident, I still had a relatively busy schedule, maybe 15 patients per half day, and usually clinics and residency were half day. And began, again, seeing my career stretch before me. Could I really do 30 patients a day, seeing patients in 15-minute increments? Wow. And I even thought at that point, how is it possible to do good primary care in such a limited amount of time like that? Because not only is it a 15-minute appointment, at check-in, my nurse is spending some time with them, getting some vitals, getting the chief complaint, getting a little bit of history. And if I were to stay on schedule, that means my face-to-face time with the patient probably would be about 7 to 8 minutes. And then that doesn't include the charting, the ordering, the thought process that has to go in to each of the patients. So
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting just because you talk about how much time you would need it to be. And full disclosure here, Patrick is my doctor. He actually prefers that I call him Dr. Roll, but we decided not to do that on the podcast here. Is that all right, Doctor?
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
I'm just laughing.
That's not true, by the way.
Yeah. That is not true. But don't say that. It's supposed to be a real and honest conversation.
Sure.
Like now they're not going to believe me.
Okay.
But I'm just laughing because you talk about the time that a visit should be, and I know how much time we've spent on some of our visits. And I've been thrown out. So also not true, but it felt that way.
Yeah, I remember in our visits, Josh, we've talked about books at times, and I've read some books that you've recommended, and they've been so helpful for me as a fellow business owner. So I appreciate that.
Well, you as well. I listen to some of what you say, but when you start talking about less bourbon and not smoking, I tune you out. But whatever.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And you may be due for a visit again there, Josh. Thought I just plant that.
That's job security.
Yeah.
So just, there are three of us here. So Rob, for those that are listening, we're talking about some of your origin, how you got there. Let's just shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
And for those that are listening, where are you coming from in this? Because you have a couple of businesses.
Yeah.
One very similar to his.
Yeah. So I have a clinical doctorate as a PA. And so I'm a little bit of a different perspective than he does. But I too, I'm retired military, and my last deployment to Iraq, I had a desire to do something differently because my kids were very young and I was just gone so much, working in the ER for so many years, and just being deployed, it was just very, very difficult. And so I bought a family practice in Tennessee. In Tennessee, PAs can own family practices. And so I bought a practice from a doctor who was foreseeing Obamacare coming up and tucking tail and running, and didn't pay much attention to that myself. And so I got into that, and I did really great in 2013, 2014. Obamacare hit in November, and I had 2,600 patients at the time, and I had lost, just from a swipe of a piece of paper, about 150 to 200 of my most treasured elderly patients. And they just got a letter in the mail and said, hey, this is who your new doctor is. And these people called the doctors, and the doctors, most of them said, we're no longer taking new patients. Our panel is closed. And so these people were just left and stuck. And so I ended up seeing them for free because I couldn't bill for them. And so I saw them for free. I took care of them. And then as I got through this, I hired another PA to run the clinic. I started doing occupational medicine on the side. That's kind of where I stemmed into doing my consulting company, Ocumed One. But as I continued to do this, I did a hybrid where I had insurance patients and all my cash patients. I flipped over to what's called direct family care. And we did that for a couple years, and same thing. I had to see 5 or 6 patients an hour. 50% of my time was done on a computer for charting. I was giving about a total of 4 or 5 minutes to each one of my patients, some of them having complex medical conditions and 16, 17 medicines from all their different specialists. And it was the quality of care was poor. And it was just very discouraging to me. So then we went into a strictly direct primary care model, and it was probably the best thing I ever did.
Wow. So back to what you were talking about, the reason I moved on from you is you offended me, so I just wanted to give him more time to talk. But no, in all seriousness, you were talking about the time that you spend with a patient. And the interesting thing is, as I hear both of these guys talk, and I know Patrick pretty well. I feel like I've known you forever just in the times that we've been talking.
It's been good.
And care is the primary thing that is on both of these guys' minds. And I think that is an essential thing to recognize here as we have these conversations. I was saying earlier that, time is the one thing that is one of the most valuable investments that we can make because you can't get it back. Like, no matter how much money you have in the world, I remember a quote from Warren Buffett, pretty wealthy guy, and he said, time is one of the most important things to me because it's the only thing you can't buy. And these guys are sitting here giving of their time for you because they believe that it matters. And I really appreciate that. And so care truly is at the forefront of what you guys are talking about. And you started to get into this in talking about it. You were starting to see where you were going with your time with the patient. So let's segue into the value of your investment and why you're doing what you're doing.
So time is probably the largest factor, I would think. So a little bit about direct primary care and how that differs from typical insurance-based fee-for-service type model that most of us are used to. In direct primary care, patients pay a monthly fee to the practice. It's not like concierge, and concierge is kind of a higher price point, maybe an annual fee. Concierge doctors may still bill insurance. In direct primary care, so at Covenant, it's anywhere from $30 a month for kids up to $85 a month for seniors. And that's kind of the typical price point of direct primary care practices around the country, I would say. So for that monthly fee, I kind of group the benefits of direct primary care under access, value, and time. So in terms of access, if we don't have to bill a third party for our services, suddenly we don't need to keep that churn going. It gets ourselves off of the treadmill as providers. It gets our patients off of the treadmill. And so if we can limit our patient panels, in the Air Force or in the fee-for-service world, 2,500, 3,000, even 4,000 patients on a panel is not unusual. In a direct primary care practice, 500 to 600 patients per provider. That may still sound like a lot, but what that translates to is probably 5 to 6 patient visits a day. Okay. And it means 24/7 call. So in terms of access, patients get unlimited visits to the provider without any copays. It's all included in their monthly fee. and 24/7 call. So they can text us securely on an app. We do a lot of telemedicine through that app. 24/7, weekends, holidays, because we want to be our patient's urgent care provider, and we want to be our patient's emergency provider too when there's things that we can appropriately handle. So I'm glad that I no longer get charts from urgent care or ER saying, oh, by the way, your patient came for this problem that you could have handled if they just had access to you after hours. So we appreciate that.
That's great.
That's really interesting, because that's even some of what we were talking about with what you're doing with Ocumed is just the having a conversation to make sure that the right care is getting to people.
Yeah, man, seriously.
Yeah. So Patrick, I think this is important because as we're talking through these things, you were talking about your journey and seeing where it could go, and you were talking about the time that you spent with the patient without like the practicals of it. What is the heart behind why that mattered to you?
The heart behind why that mattered to me is, I believe in my faith. Every human being is created in the image of God, and whether or not they acknowledge that or believe that, each human being is unique. Each human being has a story to tell.
Yeah.
Each human being has a background that figures into their medical problems that they may be coming in to see me for. So I enjoy the time that I take to get to know my patients, especially in that initial intake visit where I get to learn, what makes them tick, what their family structure is like, what they do for a living, what their hobbies are, what really charges them. And so in any patient visit, I like to do what honestly I dreaded as a family practice resident. I dreaded working in the fee-for-service world, and I think a lot of providers still dread. I ask open-ended questions, and so they might come in and I might say, "So what brings you in today?" And then just sit and let them talk. And so it's nice not to have to feel the pressure to interrupt them, because I don't have to watch the clock. And so when we can do that, just a lot more of that comes out, who they are and what maybe other things that may be undergirding their medical problems. If it's a cold or something, there's no mystical, spiritual, emotional underpinning, but for a lot of things, honestly, there really is. So it's good to have the time to delve in.
I was just reading a book the other day, and they were talking about the importance of mental health, spiritual health, and how that affects your physical health, and how so many things actually can be affecting your physical health that you don't realize are affecting it. Rob, would you say, you're from Tennessee and you have a direct primary care facility down there. Would you say that it's a similar?
Very much so. I think most of the people in the DPC community have a very similar. Maybe the pricing structure is different. Maybe the service they offer is a little bit different, but the heart behind the clinic is very similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm going to throw this out to both of you, and just I'm curious, if I'm an employer, why would direct primary care be better for my company and my people than maybe the standard model? And you've alluded to some of that, but I'm just curious how either one of you might answer that.
I think for me, the DPC model works fantastic with employers, especially small employers that can't afford higher premium health insurance. And so it gives them a level of serve to their employees, but it also gives them the ability to use it as a retention model. So when you have someone that has a small business, let's say you have 10 employees for an HVAC company or something.
Right.
And, you're trying to keep the competitors from sniping off your people, and you want to try to give them as much as you can.
Absolutely.
To make sure that they can take care of themselves and their family. And the DPC model can handle about 97, 98% of anything that comes through the door outside of a catastrophe. Mm-hmm. And so we have some larger companies that have a catastrophe insurance, which is much cheaper on the company, and then they couple it with a DPC membership for all their people. They save a significant amount of money. And so depending on the size of the company and what they're wanting, it could be something that DPC model actually gives them the ability to actually afford something in general, to where a larger company might say, I'm trying to cut my costs down. I'm paying these huge insurance and medication, fees, and coupling it with a catastrophe insurance or a health savings account. That we can, really make a benefit from that.
I talked with an employer the other day. Actually, I've talked with employers for years about this, where every year their healthcare goes up significantly. And he literally was like, I wish that my people would know that I just gave them this much of a raise.
Yeah.
Like nothing changed except it just cost more.
Yeah.
So that is something that I think is difficult as an employer. Patrick, what would you say to individuals and people who are going to work for a company that maybe has direct primary care and they're like, what is this, snake oil? Is this real? Like, what is it? Because there is I think a lot of people, they're not aware of what it is. What would you say to people that are curious? Like, I find it interesting that you said, the way that you said it, like 97, it can handle a significant amount of what might be. And when you couple it with a catastrophic plan, it covers all of it. What would you say to people who are curious about that?
So I would invite any prospective employee, for instance, of Legacy, into our office to sit down and interview us so that they can kind of kick the tires and meet us, find out more about direct primary care. As it does take some education for most, I think, in helping them understand how we differentiate ourselves from the fee-for-service model that they're used to. And but yeah, I agree with what Rob said. There's a big retention benefit, I think, for employees that you're offering, especially smaller company offering a healthcare product that covers 97-98% of healthcare needs. But try to get them to understand the benefits of DPC, where we have same day access. You can reach us after hours. We have discounts from a pharmacy in our office, discounts on labs. So just a lot of ways to save them the healthcare dollar and give them a higher product.
So people listen to this all over the country. So with direct primary care, I'm curious, is it something that only exists in Tennessee or Pennsylvania? Or you guys would know more about the network that's out there. What is availability for some of those organizations or things that are going on?
So yeah, I mean, DPC is still burgeoning. It's witnessed the last 10 years just really growing around the country. So I would usually tell people to there's a website called DPC Frontier, and they have a mapper page, and that's just kind of a visual of all the direct primary care practices around the country. You can zero in on your neck of the woods and find the nearest DPC practice. And if you're an employer, maybe reach out to them and talk to them about possibly being a medical home for their employees.
And what if, so the interesting thing, you mentioned Legacy, our sister company that actually uses your services. An interesting thing that we've seen over the years as employees cycle in and cycle out, a lot of our employees have retained direct primary care even when they've gone to another company that might offer something totally different. And I think it's back to the time piece that we were talking about. They just really like the level of care that they get from that connection.
Yeah, I think the connections is critical. I think whenever, previously, whenever I was working in an insurance-based clinic, it was incredibly defeating as a provider not to be able to spend, you say, hey, give me your top 2 complaints, or something, something in that manner where you're like, you're not really able to hear, you go home at night and you just feel like you're really unfulfilled, almost whipped, almost beat, because the quality of your care is not, to the point where you would really want it to be. And because of the fact that we only see 5 or 6 patients a day, I can schedule an hour with my patients.
Yeah.
And I can get to know them, and we can talk about fishing and hunting and family and kids, and it becomes more personable. It deepens the relationship between the provider and the patient, and that's what's lost.
So as a provider, as a doctor, does that help you to provide better care?
Tremendously, yeah. I mean, because there becomes a level of trust. You become you know the person's daily and social activities. You really deepen that relationship between yourself and them, and not only that, but the accessibility after hours. I don't know if you've ever tried to call and get a doctor or a provider on the phone during business day or not, but we've got levels of protection. First, it's our receptionist, then it's our technician, then it's our medical assistant or a nurse. And if they haven't done it by that time, you're going to be scheduled to come in and see the doctor. You're not going to get a hold of the provider. But so here you have direct access.
You talked about that earlier in our conversation about what Ocumed is doing, and you mentioned a decision tree.
Sure.
When people call in.
Yeah.
And it sounds a lot like in business, the thing that I would compare it to is, when we're trying to get to the decision maker or the person that we want to provide service to, you have these gatekeepers that basically hold you back. And so that is something that I think that exists, like you're talking about, in the standard operating procedure, and for good reason. But one of the things that I've noticed with direct primary care and the after hours and whatnot that I think is pretty beneficial to me is I get to skip the decision tree.
Tremendously.
I get to actually go right to, and not that there's anything, I don't want to say that there's not anything wrong with that. It's just different. And I've gotten to experience that level of care in being like, hey, this, and you talk about trust. So literally, this is my doctor here sitting next to me. And up until we started using your services, when I started the business and whatnot, I was younger and I didn't think a lot about healthcare. I didn't think a lot about those things. And people would ask me, well, who's your doctor? And this was from 25 to 35, this was my answer. I don't know. I seriously would be like, I don't really know, because I wouldn't think about that or whatnot. And now, and not because I've gotten older, although getting older does make you pay a little bit more attention to that. But now, not only do I know who my doctor is, you are available, and you're one of the first persons that I call related to health issues, which actually provides even better quality of life for me. Because you ever have something happen and you want to talk with someone who knows you and that you trust and they trust you, and they can give you in that moment an answer that is helping you with your perspective on the situation. And I'm just speaking to, I've talked with you about different things, and whether it's a healthcare related thing, or a book that we're talking about, but we've established relationship, which I think is really essential, especially in the healthcare world. And for me, that's been like, I can reach out to you and be like, hey, I'm really nervous about this issue that I'm having. Mm-hmm. And I know that you have the information and you can give me a perspective related to my health that I never got before. And I think that's something that I find really interesting about, the different type of care. And it's a different type in that way. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think mostly it's like, Josh, I think you have cancer until you come in and see me.
Wow. Okay, so now now I'm afraid.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
The C word.
Yeah. But that is the point. And I think one of the things that it has done for me is it's really quelled anxiousness and fear, because I'm able to ask questions and you're accessible. I think that's a huge part. So just to lighten it up a little bit, and I'm not going to ask Rob, because I asked him this softball question and he went super deep, and he's like, compassion is missing from the industry. And that was his one thing that he can't live without is compassion. So
It's my tool.
yeah, what way for you to be better than the rest of us. But in all seriousness, I do think that you're right. Compassion is something that's missing, and I love that that's your one thing that you can't live without. And so, Patrick, for you, what is one thing that you just can't live without, that you have to have? And it can be, something really deep like Rob said, or it can be, a piece of gear or a tool, or what is one thing that Patrick can't live without?
I would say the one thing that I can't live without is time. So yeah, I've already talked a bit about that, but I think that's probably the biggest benefit for me that direct primary care brings. Yeah. And then all that follows from that, if you have time with your patients. And then with direct primary care, seeing 5 to 6 patients a day, you have time with your family.
Yeah.
You have time with the other things in your life, time with your church, time seeing your kids at their sports events. But yeah, so time is I think the most important ingredient for me. It's probably a personality thing, but particularly with patients, I just love, like you said, Rob, scheduling your patients for an hour.
Yeah.
And just not feeling like there's that limit there.
Somebody knocking on your door saying your next one's ready.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's the most important tool, I would say, for my professional life is time all around.
Yeah. I think that's something that's just really important for life. There's this thing, you can look it up online. It's I can't believe I'm going to talk about this with you two guys, but it's called the death clock, and you can put in your weight and your age, and it's just an approximation, and it tells you how much time you have left. And every now and then I like to do it just to be like, oh. And another way to do it would be, I recently read something and it was like, well, how many Christmases do you have left? How many Thanksgivings do you have left? And so, like, for me, on average, with my age, this really, I think, brings perspective about time and health. And when you look at time, it really affects what you do and why you do what you do. Mm-hmm. But so for me, I have about 34 Christmases left. That's not a lot when you think about it that way.
No.
A
month. You get a month full of Christmases.
Exactly. Thanks for making that worse. So in that regard, I think that is, both of you are sharing some pretty deep one things, time and compassion. The cool thing about that, sitting in between you two here, and you both being in the medical field about caring for people, those are both hugely essential things to not necessarily providing the quality of care, but providing, I think, the right care for people. Because without both of those, you actually you're not providing true care.
Sure.
You're not providing care for the individual. And I find it really interesting because we're all different. We all have different lives. We all have different bodies. I don't know that there's any one person in the world that is the same. And it's not like it's a cookie cutter, well, you do this and you'll be all right. I work with a guy in the office that he can eat whatever he wants, and it does not affect the way that his body grows. And it just pisses me off, to be quite honest, because I'm not in that gate, but it doesn't change. I can live my life and enjoy my life as long as I know that I'm different, and I work through some of those health things to live a better life, and that affects the time and what I have left. So
that's good.
Yeah. So we've reached that point where, and we've been talking about direct primary care, but I just want to talk about health and for businesses. I love that you're both in the medical field, but you're not just serving patients, but you're both actually operating businesses. Mm-hmm. And so I love business because I believe that it can bring things to people to make their life better. And in the trades, we provide service-based businesses because what we do, whether you're working in heavy civil, and you're bringing water to people, or you're taking wastewater away, whether you're working in, the HVAC world and you're helping condition space. Like we're sitting in a building right now where regardless of what the temperature is outside, we're able to sit here comfortably and have this conversation because men and women have served to build us something. And so in that same way, in your field, that's why I love business, because I think business done right is business that serves people. And when you serve people, business goes well, and it becomes good for everyone. There's an old phrase, rising tide lifts all boats. I think it's really important how we bring that up and the way that we do it, so that we don't tip any of the boats over, and we actually provide things to people. And I think that's something that you both are doing in different ways, but similar. And so that's what we want to talk about here, not just direct primary care, but as businesses, how do we provide, and how would you say it? Would you call it healthcare? Is that what you would call it, or what would you call it, Patrick?
So I think from the business perspective, well, one thing we're building is a culture, and we're inviting employees into a culture. Every business is going to have a life of its own.
Yeah.
And we want prospective employees to really see what makes us tick as a business, what the office culture is, how we relate to one another, explain why it is we do what we do, why our nurses work there at an office that's a lot different than fee-for-service offices. It's a lot different than a hospital job. How do we retain nurses for as long as we do, or patients for as long as we do? So I think from the business perspective, that culture component is very important to keep a focus on and continue curating and building as we go.
Yeah.
We're a culture that does healthcare.
What would you say to that, Rob?
I love the creating the culture, creating an atmosphere, that's different. I think one of the reasons why there does take so much articulation on what we do is because it really offends the mind of people, because they're so trapped in this system of healthcare. I think the biggest thing that I hear the majority of the time is, this is just too good to be true. It's just too good. There's no way you're offering this much service for this little of price, And so when you can come in and get sutures or, EKGs, IV fluids, IV meds, joint injections, anything we do in the office for my office is included in the membership fees. The discounted labs, the discounted MRIs and imaging, those are all things that we offer to our patients. And again, the convenience, the affordability, the accessibility to the provider. There's just so much value that's given into a direct primary care clinic. It's really creating that atmosphere or that culture in that individual. And once they get it, our best marketing tool are our patients. It's not something we have to spend a lot of money to market, because it markets itself, because it's really a culture of love. It's a culture of compassion. It's a culture of giving. It's a culture of service. And those are all things that Christ calls us to. In that, and and it's not just for Christians. It's for anyone. There's no judgment. You're gonna know us by our love, right? You're gonna know the way we care about you. You're gonna know what we're made out of, based on how we serve you and how we love you.
Boy, that's the truth.
It's not about words. It's about just living a life of being.
Yeah.
Well said.
Well, and I think even what you just said about you don't have to spend a lot of money on marketing, your patients become your marketing. Case in point. I'm here having this conversation because I've experienced it and I believe in it and the culture of what it is. And I actually really believe that it provides a level of care that is not only different, but I think that comes back to even what Blackline is about and what the line is about in our vision of lifting the view of the skilled trades and communicating value of people. One of the reasons that we're doing what we're doing is I think that our culture in general is just missed it on compassion, time, and value. Like, people have an inherent value, not because of what they produce or what they do, but because they're human beings, because they're people. And I think that that's something that we need to change in our overall culture as a race, as a a species, whatever you want to call it. Who we are is that people have value, and I think that's really essential in the whole trades industry. Blue collar, white collar, it doesn't matter what you're doing. We need to be communicating value of people, and that's what you guys are talking about. It's one of the reasons that I'm wanting to have this conversation about direct primary care. And the cool part is, it literally is what it says in the name. It is, you are skipping the gatekeepers and you are going direct. And it's providing you that. And then what you both are talking about, one, it's providing a compassion level to the individual, and it's giving them your time, which we've established is pretty valuable. And that changes the type of care that you get. It really does. I guess to both of you, when you talk about culture and you talk about your industries and what you're in, what is it that you think, and either one of you can answer this, this is just an anyone question. What is it that you feel like is attracting those who are there working in your businesses and your industries to be a part of it? What is it that's attracting them? And what do you look for in the people that you're having to provide service to your clients, which are all of us that want to maintain good health?
I'll do a first stab here. I think what we're...
Of course, he says stab.
Stab, right, yeah. Something medical. I don't stab people.
Yeah.
But I repair stab wounds sometimes.
You can call me later to find out
unintentionally inflicted. Anyhow, we're looking for people. Immediately the first criterion is this person going to deliver good customer service? So I think our employees, our nurses, our providers will get to know their patients, our patients, mine and their patients, very well over a period of time. And when they text or call us into our service, usually the nurse is the first call during business hours, and they know them very well. They also know the context of their families, what makes them tick. So we're looking for employees that embody customer service, and that's kind of really the basis of our culture in the office.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yes, similar. I mean, it's very similar because it's the same heart. It's how do you create that culture except to have other people that are like-minded, that are with you on that same page. Just really trying to develop that atmosphere, and as you connect with other people, and it really has to be a motive issue. The motive of their heart has to be good. The motive of their heart has to be to serve. The motive of their heart has to be to love. The motive of the heart has to be to care and have compassion. There's a lot of motives to do this.
Yeah.
That could be negative.
Yeah.
But the motive, I think, of the like-mindedness has to be pretty connected to yours.
So I actually think that we've touched on something that I would say is a good healthcare question, and I would say that because I really believe it's a 360-degree thing. I talked about earlier that I believe it's mental, spiritual, physical, all of those things together in what healthcare is. And so, as an individual, and this is less of a doctor question and more of just a people question. Whether because in business, I would say it's the same thing. In business, we want people that their motives align. And there are all sorts of motives in business that we can go after. And so what is it as an individual? How do I whether I'm a young man or a young woman coming into adulthood, business, having to kind of fend for myself or be a part of society. That'd be the way that I would say it. Or whether I'm older and realizing, hey, I think I've been missing it with my motives. Because one thing that I would just say to both of you here as we're having this conversation is when I was young, I thought I knew it all. Then I thought I figured it out. And now I'm at a place in life where I'm realizing the rest of my life is just going to be revealing what I don't know. Yeah. And so for me, how do we work on, as individuals, making sure that our motives are the right motives as we're moving forward? Because I think if your motive is the right motive and you can get that straight, then wherever you work, you're going to attract people with that like-minded motive. You're going to feel more fulfilled in what you're doing, more satisfied in what you're doing. And so, again, I'm throwing this out to both of you, but how do we maintain our motives, like the right motives? And I'm curious what you guys would say to that.
I think for me, the right motive has always been defined by my wrong motives, all the negative experiences that I've had from my wrong motives, and really attuning my heart to the wrong ways that I've done things in the past, learning from experience.
Yeah.
I think it coincides with our walk with the Lord. When we're first born, everything's new and exciting, and it seems like every prayer you ask, it gets answered, and it's almost like being a baby and having your butt wiped and fed all the time, and as you get a little bit older, God gives you a little bit more autonomy to make some decisions, and you think you've got it all figured out, you've got faith figured out, and as you get older, you realize that the vastness and the greatness of God is so unattainable, like you can't really understand. Like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know about just the majesty of who He is. It's the same thing in life. Is that as we get older and we start to gain wisdom, we have to realize that we're more open. We have to understand that we might not know all the things that we think we know, and that our motive has to be checked with accountability.
Yeah.
And of people that have like faith and like desire, and that you have to realize that you can be wrong.
Yeah, that's true.
A general motive, I think, would be to try to do excellent work for the glory of God, and all that is involved in unpacking that from a business perspective, personal perspective, professional perspective, day-to-day perspective. That's good to keep that in mind and all that means.
I did not know that we were going to be like, I'm like two spiritual pillars on either side of me, kind of, it's interesting though. I didn't have any idea of your personal faith or anything like that when we first connected, and even up until today, actually.
Yeah.
And I would say the same with you, and I think regardless of what your spirituality is or your faith is, what we're talking about is the importance of when you go after those motives that matter. When you go after those things, whatever they are in your life, you're going to attract like-minded people. And if you're a business owner, if you're a worker, and I keep finding I don't go after like-minded people to come alongside. I just find it naturally unfolds as I go after the motives that matter.
Yeah, that's true.
And that makes it, and I work with people who don't believe exactly what I believe, or they don't believe anything that what I believe from a faith standpoint, but yet their motives are very similar.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's really essential as we're building culture, and we're building that and related to you two guys, related to healthcare, as we build that culture as a company, an organization, or an individual, how then that can make for a better life overall. because we're helping. One of my favorite words is efficiency, and the reason for that is because time is so valuable. I don't want to waste any of it.
Sure.
And so when we go after the motives that matter, and let's just say it this way, regardless of what you believe from a faith standpoint, people matter. You know, the people that we're next to, that we work with, and the people that we're serving, they matter. And when you have that motive, not only is it fulfilling, it is profitable, it is effective, it is efficient because it attracts like-minded people to build with. And that is probably one of the biggest inefficiencies in life, is the amount of time that I've wasted not going, like if you go after the motive and the motive that matters, if you go after that, then it brings in these other people. And the most effective thing that I've seen is, instead of me looking at what someone presents, and I'm just going to touch on this a little bit here because I think this is really important. Blackline does media marketing for, the trades, shameless plug. But one of my biggest struggles with marketing is I want it to be true. And, if you're listening or you're watching, specifically if you're watching, you only see from this side of the camera. You don't see what's going on back there. And I think it's really essential for us as people to realize the importance in when we have a camera or we're doing something, or even we're communicating with people, the importance in being real and authentic, because it's so easy in today's culture and society to be fake. Mm-hmm. It's so easy to be like, I'm gonna pull up my phone and I'm gonna show you this side of my life. And you got to be careful who you bring into that. But when we go after those right motives, it changes all of that. And it brings it to a place where we can be effective. And we talked about this in the podcast that you and I did earlier, Rob. It's like one person can make a difference in an industry and a culture. And you guys are literally, you've decided to bite off making a difference in the medical industry, which that's a big one. And we're trying to make a difference in the trades industry, and I think that's also a big one. And one of the things that has happened, I believe that one person can make a difference, but here is why. When they decide to go after the right motives, when they decide to go after the motives that matter, it affects other people around them. You were talking earlier about safety and the importance of everyone knowing, and he was telling me, like in the medical industry, when you guys are there, everyone has the right to say stop, and we were talking about safety and the importance of having the right to say that, just because it triggers a mindset then of like re-looking at things and going after things. When you are going after those motives, and as one individual, you have that ability to make a difference, because what happens is you make a difference in your life or in that person's life as you say things, as you do things, and then it attracts like-minded people, and then your impact is actually increased. Mm-hmm. And that's how one person can truly make a difference, I believe, because they say stop, or they open their mouth and they share with their voice what they see. Mm-hmm. It invites a collaboration that then we can come together and we can actually affect change on a massive scale. And that's what we're talking about here, whether it's direct primary care, whether it's lifting the view of the skilled trades. We're talking about making, massive change, but it starts with one. And I think, I recently heard a guy say, he goes, if you want to make a difference, he goes, you start by making a difference in your own home. Mm-hmm. And then you move to making a difference in your town, mm-hmm. in your city, in your state. And it's like, wow, that has the power to affect change and actually change the world that we live in for the better. Yeah. And I think that's what we're all looking for here. Mm-hmm. Regardless of what you believe, we want a better world for tomorrow. I think I just quoted a movie, but yeah. Well, we've come to that place where I really want to, we've talked about direct primary care. We've talked about what it is, how it affects business, how it works. I guess You know, Rob, you shared earlier about a mistake that you had made, and Patrick, I want to ask you that because I think that's part of what makes this podcast real and authentic, which is important to me. Mm-hmm. It's important to me because, you know, whether we're marketing or not, we want to tell the true story. Because we think that the authenticity and truth matters, and it matters. Doesn't it matter in everything? I mean, we're talking about healthcare. Doesn't it matter that your patient tells you the truth? Mm-hmm. You know,
absolutely.
One glass of bourbon a day, Patrick, just one. I mean, yeah. That is a joke. Like half the things that I've said today related to my health are a joke. But I think that really matters in the way that we're communicating as employers to employees. The truth matters, you know, and when we can go after that, that's how we really can affect that change. And so in talking about mistakes that we've made, that's how we can share truth with people, to be real and authentic, to actually, when I was talking with you earlier, share with others something that either can give them a foundation or a step to stand on to go farther than we did, or it can give them something to grab a hold that they can pull themselves up, or that they cannot make the same mistake that we did so that they can advance farther and make that difference, make that change. So, I mean, I'm fine with posing you the question again, and I
have plenty of mistakes I can talk about.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you have a different one that you would be willing to share, you know, I mean, the last one that you shared, oh my goodness, man,
what was the first one?
So, why don't you share that with Patrick?
I'll just reshare this again.
Yeah,
how about that?
Wow.
So I was deployed in Iraq, and I was helping run a little trauma center that we had out there, a little tactical medical clinic, and we were really close to the front lines, and so it was myself, and I had so I was a first lieutenant at the time. I was getting ready to put on captain, and I was working with a lieutenant colonel, ER doctor from a level 1 trauma teaching hospital, right? Mm-hmm. A little intimidating for a PA. So this Kenyan guy, he fell out of a guard tower. I think it was intentional. Don't know for sure. Nevertheless, I'm assessing him, and I've kind of got the lead on it, and the guy's just kind of sitting in the background. And I'm like, we need to put a pelvic binder on him because I think he's fractured his pelvis, because you can bleed out very quickly in the pelvis. And so the doc goes, no, let's get him out of here. We got to get him out of here as quick as we can. And I didn't say anything. I just didn't. I should have tactfully said, sir, this blah, 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 right? Yeah. Got a little overpowered by his position, his rank, and his authority in the civilian world. And the guy, we transferred him out. In the middle of the transfer, he died. And that just stuck with me. It stuck with me for years and years and years. And my takeaway from that was, you know, don't be afraid to stand up and say something. You know, don't be afraid to get out there and just say. And that's where we got, you know, when we do a timeout, we talk about, you know, everyone has a say in any kind of procedure. Yep. If anyone feels comfortable uncomfortable at any time, say stop. You know, and so that was kind of the gist of the story. Yeah, it's a tough story.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I think I so appreciate you sharing, and here I made you do it twice, sharing a hard story, but
I've had a lot of therapy over this, but it's probably going to need some more. Thanks, man. Appreciate
I'm not laughing at your therapy. I mean, the truth of it is that we have to be able to talk about hard things. You know, we have to be able to talk about hard things if we want to be able to move on from them. I remember once I was in therapy, and I actually think therapy is really good. And I even say that out loud because I think that there's this misconception about therapy, and there's this desire for us to, again, to sit here on camera and look like we have it all together.
Sure.
And the reality is that none of us do. But I remember when I was in therapy, the guy there that was helping me through my situation, and he made a comment about what I was trying to deal with, something in an individual who had hurt me. And he said, well, that individual is still operating from their wound of when that happened. And this was really striking to me. He said, so if they were wounded at 12 years old, then you're not dealing with a 50-year-old. You're not dealing with a 60-year-old. And until that wound is healed or helped, whatever it is, it's like they're still there. Mm-hmm. That's who they are. Which gave me a huge perspective in realizing, and I'll talk about my mistake. See, you guys just get to share one or two. I'm on this podcast every week sharing my mistakes. And the thing is that they're infinite. And I think that's important to remember. Mm-hmm. You're never going to come to a place in life where you don't make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And a matter of fact, if you become so afraid of making mistakes, you're going to be like that 12-year-old boy. You're just going to stay there. You have to get out there and you have to do it. And you have to face it. The biggest thing when I was talking with the therapist, was that he said, if you don't face that, you're never going to move beyond that. And so that really helped me in my perspective in not only how I deal with the people around me, but then recognizing when I'm reacting a certain way, why am I reacting this way? And we talked earlier about, you have these triggers that happen, and usually a trigger happens because of some sort of trauma that you've had related to that. And one of my biggest mistakes is not being self-aware enough when I've been in situations and allowing my triggers to lead the trajectory of the conversation of where I'm going. And I have people who no longer work for me that should because of triggers and my handling of a situation that, listen, I just want to be really honest here. I am not a great boss or a great person. The only thing that makes me better is deciding not to quit, to choose to endure and go to the next place. But that means that there is, and this is my mistake, that there is a trail of people that I have wounded and that I have hurt. And my biggest mistake is not biggest, but one of the biggest, has not been being self-aware enough to recognize that triggered me and how I then respond to that person. Because when they touch the wound, and maybe you guys can speak to this, like if you have a wound and it's cut open or whatever and you don't take care of it and it continues to fester, when you touch it, does your body even, is it a voluntary or involuntary reaction then when you touch that festering wound? Like, if I would have a wound on my arm that was, infected and someone hit it or touched it, would my body naturally react or would I have control over it? I'm just curious. Does that make sense? They're both looking at me like, you idiot. What are you trying to say?
I think it would naturally react. I mean,
So it would be in school, this is revealing, we had involuntary and voluntary spasms, muscle spasms. Like when you hit my knee.
I mean, I don't think you're going to involuntarily punch the guy in the face.
Oh, well, that's what I did. No, I didn't.
But you're going to involuntarily feel pain. And
you're going to involuntarily, you're going to draw that up.
And so just like that, my mistake was when I didn't deal with those traumas that I had that triggered something, I would not be aware, and so I would react, and then I would hurt someone else. They say that hurt people hurt people. The reason they say that is because it's true.
Yeah.
And that's the importance of, and so for me, I had to realize that therapy was okay. Yeah. And it's all therapy is this is a form of therapy right here. Therapy is communicating and talking with someone else that you can trust, that is going to help you be able to look at whatever that trauma is, whatever that wound is, and to help you get in there and clean it out and make it that you can heal from it and move on. Listen, I have scars on my body from stupid things that I've done at work, but I'm not still bleeding from any of those wounds because they've healed. It doesn't mean that you don't have the thoughts or the recollection, and I would actually go as far as to say, I think that scars are really important because they remind you of what happened so that you don't repeat it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we both love saddleback leather, and one of the things that they say is, scars are good. They tell a story. So with that, Patrick, I guess what is a mistake that you've made that you're willing to share with people that they might be able to learn from and be able to get a handle on or a foot up on that they might be able to overcome what they're dealing with?
I think too, one, in agreement with you that I too kind of can shoot from the hip as far as talking with employees. And my wife is I'm blessed that my wife is the administrator of my practice. And HR, the human resources aspect of any business, I think is the most rewarding and the most challenging part. And my wife really helps me with that. So she has kind of reminds me that, hey, it's sometimes it's just don't speak in the moment. Don't write an email in the moment. Maybe don't communicate by email. Don't communicate by text message because things can just be misinterpreted. And I call my wife the employee whisperer. She does that very, very well.
Great.
So
Wow.
I'm learning to keep myself in my lane.
Yeah.
So, but the mistake I was thinking of, we've talked a lot about culture.
Yeah.
And I think I had assumed as an early business owner that culture would be absorbed by my employees by osmosis, and that osmotic process would happen just automatically at the interview stage, and then they would come out, hit the ground running, and understand the culture. So where this one instance where this came to bite me, when I got started in 2016, the medical culture was what it was then. It was not as fraught with landmines as it is now. And by landmines, I mean that there's now a relatively new culture in the culture at large, and especially in the culture in the medicine, I'll just say that 2 + 2 = 5. And there's a culture in medicine that would say, it's my job as a physician to support those in their belief that 2 + 2 = 5. I will prescribe things that help them in that belief. I'll make referrals that will support that belief. And it is my values as a Christian business owner. Now, I don't have a Christian practice. I don't require a statement of faith from any of my employees.
Good.
Right.
But I've learned, or any of my patients, but I've learned through the years that particularly with providers, I do need to be pretty precise in what my values are as a business owner. And in my local area, actually a local school board, one of these issues came to the fore, and I felt compelled to speak to it publicly. And I had a physician that was working with me at that time that I didn't effectively communicate my values and what I expect from my providers when it comes to these cultural issues, as I do want to at least uphold a biblical worldview. And my providers don't need to espouse Christian faith. They don't even need to espouse a biblical worldview, but I asked them to abide by these 3 or 4 points. And I wasn't that upfront with this individual. And I think that it was just unfair to this individual. And then when these things came out in public, this person felt compelled to leave the practice because of that.
Wow.
So now I think much more straightforward in communicating those. I even have them sign something, but yes, that individual felt compelled to leave. This doctor is just an excellent physician. This doctor is employed locally. We've had contact since then. I think the relationship is good by God's grace. So I think I've learned from that mistake to be more forthright in communicating those values.
I think that you touch on something that I just think is really interesting, especially as I'm a founder of a business, and I also struggle with that osmosis thought. I struggle a lot with context. You can ask any member on my team, because sometimes my mind is moving so fast or whatever we're about, and I just think that my wife also reminds me that not everybody is in my head. And I think as business owners, as job leaders, as superintendents, a leader is just someone that people are following. And if you are out there and you're working on a job, you are a leader. And to the point that you made earlier, I think that this is really important to say. Anyone can say, hey, stop. And anyone can be leading on a job. You can be a laborer and still be a leader, because there are other laborers, there are other people. My goodness, I have had laborers, my title, which titles are meaningless, is chairman. And sometimes the laborers are the ones that lead me the best because they speak up and they say, hey, what about this?
Yeah.
And to your point, I would say for those of us, as we grow in organization, it actually gets harder. That culture, the only way for culture to be effectively communicated and for people to understand it, wait for it, this is really intense, is to communicate it over and over and over and over. I believe that, I read somewhere that something doesn't really resonate with someone until you've said it to them 7 times. And I have children, so I know that it's like double that in all reality. But I'm the same way. Until I hear something and it takes time for it to connect. And if we're communicating a culture and the things that matter to us, which is what you're talking about, Patrick, which is the motives that matter, whatever they might be. If you're not communicating them outwardly to your team, in whatever role that is, whether it's quality of work, truthfulness, authenticity, whatever it is, then that's on you as a leader for not communicating that to them. And honestly, that's some of what I was talking about earlier in the areas that I've missed is people tend to feel blindsided then when we don't communicate that. And they're like, well, that's not what I thought. And sometimes it's good for us as we communicate that because it insists on collaboration. And is what I mean by that is it insists on that. Like when we're on the job, when you're working in the trade, and you're having and communicating, I deal with this a lot in the design world where we start with a piece of paper that looks much like this floor. There's nothing on it. And a client has a picture in their mind of what they want, and they're communicating it to me. If I don't communicate well what I've interpreted they're saying to me, and I don't repeat it and go over it from like 18 different angles, we'll get to the end of a building. And wow, I'm actually going to say this. We'll get to the end of a building and we will be done and walking away. And they're like, that's not what I wanted. That's not their fault. And that's the importance of communicating and over-communicating and over-communicating. And now all of us then need to step up and ask questions. We need to say, stop. We need to say, hey, what's this? And so that's on the client too. But we have to continually be communicating. It's not something that's just going to happen naturally. So
I think a really important thing to understand about being a visionary, I think we're all 3 visionaries. I think that it's very hard to be a business owner and not be a visionary, is that people can be excited about your vision and not have caught the vision. They can be excited about your passion and your vision and be in love with that about you.
Come on.
But not have made it their own. And so when you do that, what ends up happening is that you have people that work their tail feathers off and they don't understand why.
Wow.
And so it's our job as visionaries to make sure we articulate and develop that, cultivate the vision within them so that they understand the why in the vision. And as we do that, people will be more apt to be in line with the vision and help with the vision. You know, the reality of it is that you don't have authority over anyone except for those which give you the authority.
Yeah.
Right. So, so many times, even biblically, you see that.
Yeah.
It's, and, Jesus says in John 6 that, no one, it says the will of the Father is this for me, is that I'll not lose one which the Father has given me, but raised him up in the last day. And so who has God given us? Who are the people that have surrendered their heart to us for leadership, for mentoring? Those, maybe if we're lucky, we'll be like Christ and we'll have 12. Our 3 beloveds are our family. That's our immediate family. Maybe if we're lucky as men, we might have 9 people total just like Christ did, to have a fulfillment. I think sometimes we feel like we have to have thousands. If Jesus wanted to start a mega church, he would have did it on the mountainside when he fed the 5,000, right? So for us, it's like, how do we be intentional with cultivating the vision in the people that have really given their hearts to us?
Wow.
And that's not even a Christian thing. That's just a leadership thing. You know
It
what I
is.
mean? So it's like, who are the people that we can identify that can say, we can look at them and go, man, that guy is really given to me, given to the vision, given to the practice. How do I cultivate that in them?
Yeah.
How do I build it bigger in them than it is with me?
Yeah. I of course, we're an hour in, and it starts to get really good. That's usually how this goes. But I think that what you're talking about there is that importance in the power of affecting the culture through multiplication. And is what I mean by that is I can't affect 5,000 people.
Sure.
But I can affect one. And the importance of communicating that vision. I hate that you guys are talking about all the things that I've failed at. And man,
That's because we've failed at them too.
I am spectacular at failing at them. But when you talk about that, it's like the importance of, and I think what you just said there, I have to repeat it because it's like, they are excited about the vision. They've caught they love that in you, and so they follow along with you, but they haven't caught the vision. And that actually is not their fault.
No.
And it's okay for someone to be excited about the vision that they see in you, and it might not be the vision for them. And I think as visionaries, as founders, as bosses, we get to see things that not everybody sees. And so we naturally, one of the things early on as an employer that I had to learn is someone would come on board and I would immediately plan out the next 5 years of their time at our company in my mind. It was just a natural way of going. And it's like, it really was wrong because it hindered us being able to actually catch the vision together. And then I would look at people who have left that they were really excited about the vision and I misunderstood it. And then they realized, oh, that's not my vision. That's not for me. And I had to why are we still talking about my mistakes? I had to deal with.
We actually teamed up and we said, let's make this about you.
I knew when I wasn't in the room earlier.
It's
that
called
that was a mistake. It's called therapy.
It's called therapy, right?
Tag team therapy.
That's going to be the title of the podcast is therapy.
Tag team.
Tag team therapy.
You're
so
next.
yeah, I grew up in the '80s, so now I'm thinking of Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan.
Definitely.
So yeah,
But I think let me add a little bit more to that. I think we have to learn how to give ourselves grace, and that's one of the things we're not good at as leaders, or we'll just stuff it back and not learn from it. Right. So if we're going to develop as leaders, we have to realize that we have to give ourselves grace for the errors that we've made. But we also have to understand that we learn leadership and we advance in leadership at the expense of others. And that's a painful lesson. So
we learn leadership at the expense of others.
We learn how to be parents at the expense of our kids. We learn how to be good husbands at the expense of our wives. And we hurt people along the way. And it's something that we have to learn if we really truly care. We have to allow that to transform who we are, and we have to do the work ourselves to make sure that we don't repeat these things. That's what makes us great leaders, great husbands, great fathers.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a good question to revisit our mistakes and think about our mistakes and look back at those signposts.
Yeah.
Yes, I did this thing, and this is what I learned from it, and
Yeah.
that's a good analogy. Sort of the rough edges that need to be smoothed out over time as we grow.
Well, and I would just add to that. You talk about those signposts, and we talk about our failures. I love the quote from Winston Churchill, and I think this is from him. So if you Google it and I'm wrong, well, then it's just another one of my failures. But I remember reading this, and that you only fail if you quit.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes whatever it is that we're in or that we're about, the importance of, enduring, steadfastness, and not quitting. And not quitting doesn't mean that you don't change careers. I mean, you told me about your list of things that you have done.
Yeah.
But not quitting is continuing to press on to be better tomorrow than you were today.
Do the work.
Do the work. So, well, gentlemen, I so appreciate you taking the time, making the investment to step up to the line. And something I've started saying to people as people are listening and then reaching out and saying, hey, I want to have an honest conversation with you. I'm talking more and more to people like yourselves who, you guys didn't step up to the line today. You've been holding the line.
Wow.
And I greatly appreciate standing on the line and holding the line with you.
Yes.
And I think that truly is what we are doing. And if you're listening out there, I challenge you, don't just step up to the line. Maybe you are needing to step up to the line, but hold the line with us. Hold the line with us, and let's go after a better tomorrow than what we have today. In your business, in your personal life, in your health, your wellness, we want you to live a better life. So if these guys, we're gonna list their information. Your website is ocumed1.com.
Yeah, my direct family care is DFC for direct family care clinic.com.
Okay, dfcclinic.com. Military guy, he loves the letters and
That's
things
right.
like that. Yeah.
Makes it easy.
Yeah, and you are, where can they find you here in the Lancaster County area?
CovenantMD.net.
Okay,
That's great, dude.
CovenantMD.net. Patrick, Rob, so grateful to have spent this time with you here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks, Josh.
So hold the line. All right. Thanks, guys.
I have to be. Said that too soon.
You do realize they're still recording, so that's going to be on the podcast.